Chef Marcus Webb pointed directly at Jonathan Roumie in front of 80 people and said it with a smile so comfortable it made the whole room worse, a chilling prelude to a spectacle of cruelty that would irreversibly dismantle his culinary empire, as his son, Tyler Webb, stepped forward with a $400 plate of a 5 Wagyu beef swimming in a rich black truffle cream, and, with a terrifyingly casual flick of his wrists, upended the entire scalding dish directly onto Jonathan's immaculate tailored jacket. The dining room of the elite Chicago restaurant, a temple of uncompromising gastronomy where food cost percentages were guarded like state secrets, and the wealthy paid exorbitant sums for the privilege of Marcus's attention, fell into a suffocating, deliberate silence, the kind of heavy quiet that precedes a catastrophic storm. Marcus, standing near the mahogany expo line, erupted into a cruel, booming laugh, his arrogance blinding him to the profound dignity of the man seated before him, a man who had simply bowed his head in a quiet moment of prayer before his meal, an act of vulnerability that Marcus, in his toxic elitism, found uniquely offensive. The truffle cream dripped methodically from Jonathan's lapel, staining the fabric and pooling on the pristine white tablecloth, yet Jonathan did not shout, did not curse, and did not rise in anger. Instead, he maintained an exceptional quiet strength, slowly wiping his face with a linen napkin, his eyes locking onto Marcus's with a piercing calm that sent a sudden, involuntary wave of nausea through the kitchen staff watching from the swinging doors. Jonathan, who had been brought to this establishment to finalize a monumental $220 million hospitality and real estate partnership that would have expanded the Webb empire across 3 continents, placed the napkin down, stood up with unshakable composure, and in a voice that carried no malice but absolute uncompromising authority, informed Marcus that the deal was entirely and permanently canceled, leaving the chef's laughter to die instantly in his throat as the colossal financial ruin of his own making began to dawn on him. This single, horrific act of public humiliation, born of unchecked arrogance and a systematic culture of contempt, was the catalyst that finally broke the silence of Carol Reyes, a brilliant but marginalized sous chef who had spent 17 years enduring Marcus's tyrannical reign while quietly and methodically documenting every shadowed corner of his corrupt enterprise. Carol had amassed a hidden dossier containing precisely 3,400 meticulously recorded incidents of abuse, a staggering archive of darkness that detailed horrific wage theft, the systemic labor trafficking of undocumented workers who were threatened with deportation if they dared to speak, and the relentless psychological humiliation of vulnerable line cooks who were broken down daily to feed Marcus's insatiable ego. When news of the canceled $220 million deal reached the kitchen, Carol realized that the impenetrable armor of the Webb empire was finally cracked, and she took her 17 years of hidden documentation, wrapped in layers of encrypted files and physical ledgers, directly to a specialized forensic accountant and a team of relentless federal investigators. The media fallout was instantaneous and explosive, transforming the once revered chef into a pariah overnight as the public, driven by a fierce desire for justice and righteous anger against systemic workplace abuse, devoured the horrifying details of the leaked dossier, shifting their empathy entirely to the marginalized workers who had suffered in silence to produce the exceptional plates of food that the elite so casually consumed. As the federal trial commenced, the courtroom became a stage for a high moral contrast, a David and Goliath battle executed not through brute force, but through the irrefutable, crushing weight of meticulous documentation, where the staggering statistic of $9.3 million in stolen wages was laid bare before a jury that grew increasingly disgusted by Marcus's lack of remorse. The climax of the trial arrived not just with Carol's powerful testimony, but with the shocking appearance of Tyler Webb himself, who, having been forced to confront the monstrous reality of his flawed upbringing and the devastating consequences of his own cruel actions that night in the dining room, took the stand to testify against his own father, his voice trembling as he corroborated the systemic abuse and publicly apologized to Jonathan Roumie, the workers, and the community he had wronged. Tyler's realization of his father's true nature marked the beginning of a profound redemption arc, a painful but necessary tearing down of his inherited arrogance, which culminated in Marcus Webb being handed a guilty verdict, a 10-year federal prison sentence, and the complete liquidation of his once untouchable empire. From the ashes of this dismantled kingdom, a new, deeply ethical culinary enterprise named Commonwealth was born, founded by Carol Reyes and a collective of the wronged employees, operating on a radical model of profit sharing, absolute transparency, and genuine human dignity, proving that true excellence in the kitchen does not require the sacrifice of one's soul. In a twist of poetic justice, Tyler Webb, stripped of his wealth and entitlement, was taken in by Carol, not as a privileged heir, but as a humble prep cook, working quietly at the lowest station to genuinely rehabilitate himself, chopping vegetables and scrubbing floors as he walked a long, difficult path toward atonement, finding more peace in this honest labor than he ever did in his father's shadow. Let us know in the comments below if this story has moved you and you'd like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light. Please consider supporting our work by checking the donate link in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter we're preparing for you. As Commonwealth flourished, becoming a beacon of hope and a testament to the triumph of the underdog, Marcus sat in his prison cell, his empire liquidated, and his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale of hubris, eventually writing a letter of acknowledgement to his son, a fragile, belated admission of his failures. While Carol and her team continued to serve exceptional food, their success serving as the ultimate validation that ethical management and compassionate leadership will always outlast the cruel spectacles of arrogant men. That the pressures of the industry required compromises that ethics couldn't survive at the level where real success lived. Carol's answer delivered to a room of 200 restaurant owners and operators was not rhetorical. She described what she had built and how she had built it and what the first 2 years of operation had produced in terms that were financial before they were moral, because she understood that the room needed the financial argument before it would receive the moral one. Commonwealth had operated at a higher labor cost than most comparable fine dining establishments. Its wage structure, its benefits, its commitment to paid time for the monthly shared meals, and for training that went beyond technique into the culture of the kitchen. All of this cost more than the industry standard, which had evolved toward the assumption that low labor costs were a necessary component of profitability at the level where quality dining lived. Commonwealth's revenue in its second year was 40% higher than its first. Its staff turnover rate was 4%, against an industry average of 73%. Its food cost percentage was 2 points lower than industry standard because workers who were treated with dignity and paid fairly took less from the kitchen and wasted less and care more about what happened to the ingredients between delivery and plate. Its customer return rate was the highest Carol had ever seen at any establishment she had worked in, including the Meridian in its most successful years. She put these numbers on the screen behind her. The industry has a story about why excellence requires exploitation. She said the story says that the standards that produce exceptional food can only be maintained through pressure. That pressure requires fear. That fear requires the power differential that comes from underpaying people who have no alternatives. I spent 17 years inside that story. I documented what it actually produced. She paused. These numbers are the alternative story. The one the industry doesn't want to believe because believing it would require changing everything about how it operates. The room was quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when something has been said that cannot be easily processed and disagreed with simultaneously. A man near the back raised his hand. He had been running a restaurant in Indianapolis for 20 years. Successful enough to be at a conference like this, but not successful enough to be certain the success would continue. He asked how she had made the transition. How you built a culture like Commonwealth's when everything you had learned about the industry pointed the other way. You hire people who have been failed by the previous culture, Carol said. And then you listen to them, not perform listening. Actually listen in a way where what they tell you changes what you do. She looked at the room. Most restaurant owners I've met are good at performing listening. They're terrible at the actual thing because the actual thing requires you to accept that you don't already know. And accepting that you don't already know is one of the hardest things for people who have built their identity around knowing. She told them about the interviews, about the monthly shared meals that had come from one of those interviews, about the equipment replacements, and the scheduling changes, and the dozens of small adjustments that had come from deciding that the people doing the work were the primary source of information about how to do the work better. She did not tell them it was easy. She told them it was worth it, which was a different thing. She flew back to Chicago and went directly from the airport to the restaurant, arriving in time to see the kitchen in its closing routine. The familiar choreography of a well-run kitchen at the end of service. Tyler was breaking down his station with a methodical care that Carol had come to expect from him. Patricia was on the other side of the line doing the same. The kitchen was loud with the specific noise of cleanup, water, and movement, and the particular banter of people who had just done something hard together and were now on the other side of it. Carol stood at the entrance to the kitchen for a moment before anyone saw her, watching. This was what she had spent 17 years documenting the absence of. Not the technical excellence of the food, which had always existed in the kitchen she worked in, but the specific quality of a room where people were doing difficult work and were not afraid of the room they were doing it in. Miguel looked up and saw her and nodded. Patricia waved. Tyler turned around and said, "How was Indianapolis?" And Carol said, "Good." They listened and Tyler said, "Did it help?" And Carol thought for a moment and said, "I think so." Some of them, the ones who were ready to hear it. She hung up her coat and went to her office to write the notes from the conference while they were still clear. The kitchen cleaned itself around her as she wrote, and the sounds of it came through the office wall, and she sat inside those sounds and wrote about what she had built and why it had worked and what it required of the people who built it, which was not primarily talent or strategy, but the specific willingness to keep asking rather than assuming, to keep listening rather than concluding, to accept that the work was not done when the numbers were good, but only when the people doing it confirmed through their own words, in their own time, that the space was actually what it claimed to be. It was a high standard. It was the right standard. And it was, as she had told the room in Indianapolis, worth